These last 4 months have been 4 of the toughest months to be in crypto ever. If you've been in crypto for a while, especially when we look at Trump, and we were all, told basically that once Trump came in, that the Bitcoin price would explode, and it basically just has done the opposite of that and just collapsed, right? And for me, and you might be in a similar situation if you've been in Bitcoin crypto for more than a few months. 4 months ago, my portfolio was at an all-time high, and now it's more than 50% losses from that all-time high. So that's been tough to handle, but in this video, I'm going to show you how there's light at the end of the tunnel, and there's still a path for Bitcoin to get up to 200K plus by the end of the year this year. I think that with these tariffs and everything, a lot of the growth that we were anticipating has just been pushed back. But ultimately, in the long run, this is going to be beneficial for the stock market and for crypto. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about how all this FUD about the tariffs is just overblown. And I've talked about this before. It is a big deal, but when you look at what Democrats have done in the past and talked about in the past, I'm going to show some clips about that. You can see that people are trying to paint Trump in as this crazy guy who's going off with these tariffs, but this has actually been a problem for several years that Democrats have actually addressed too, in a similar way that Trump has done. So I'll get to that, and I'll explain the path forward, how Bitcoin can get to 200K and beyond, how all of this eventually is going to lead to more money printing, which is going to increase the Bitcoin price. So hit the like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into it here. And so I'm seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter and everywhere. People are just, not only Democrats, but Republicans turning against Trump with these tariffs, saying they're a horrible idea. But starting with the left, the Democrats, of course, they're always going to be opposed to whatever Trump does. But I have a few clips to show you here, showing that basically Democrats throughout the last 30 years have basically been giving a very similar tone about tariffs and how they're unfair and how we need to fix this trade deficit problem. And so starting here, let's look at this clip from Nancy Pelosi from 1996.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade.
The status quo, right? This was 1996, and this is the same vibes now. Everyone who's coming out against these tariffs are basically like embracing the status quo and saying, oh, everything's fine, everything's good, and you're disrupting this balance. Well, the truth is that this economy in this country is collapsing, and it's been collapsing for several years, and drastic measures have to be taken, despite what you hear about people saying, everything's so perfect now, like acting like these 4 years under Biden, food prices didn't go up, 50, 100%. And it's like people are saying that everything is so good right now, and we don't want to disrupt this delicate balance. But it's not good, guys. Like, the situation is not good with the economy, and it's been on the downturn since, for decades.
But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On exports, China...
Does that chart look familiar? Like something like Trump just showed us about China and these other countries? It hasn't changed since then. It's only gotten worse. And this is one of the biggest liberals out there, you know, telling you how bad it is back in 1996. Hasn't got any better since then. This is back when, you know, obviously Pelosi had more of a brain than she does now. Now she's kind of more part of the establishment, like I've been talking about, part of the status quo. But it's interesting to see her break it down in a similar way. You could replace exactly what she said here with Trump saying this, and you wouldn't be surprised about Trump saying this. Now let's go ahead to Bernie Sanders here in 2008 saying a similar thing about tariffs. Let's play that.
What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, healthcare, pensions, throw them out on the street because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants, we move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one. Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth. He has been honest on this one. He is the lead advocate of unfettered free trade. And that's an also important part of this right-wing ideology, that it is good for America that corporations can go to China and bring products back into this country.
So we're calling that right-wing ideology not having tariffs, right? Was right-wing ideology back then, but now having tariffs is right-wing ideology. Well, let's go ahead to Obama in 2016 talking about tariffs from China as well.
We had a tire case in which they were flooding us with cheap domestic tires or cheap Chinese tires. And we put a stop to it. And as a consequence, saved jobs throughout America. I have to say that Governor Romney criticized me for being too tough in that tire case. Said this wouldn't be good for American workers and that it would be protectionist. But I tell you, those workers don't feel that way. They feel as if they had finally an administration who was going to take this issue seriously.
And this wasn't just clear just way back in Obama, you know, several years ago, but as recently as 2024, Biden addressed tariffs as well.
That's why today I'm announcing new tariffs in key sectors of the economy that are going to ensure that our workers are not held back by unfair trade practices.
Pretty interesting, right? All these liberals and stuff trying to convince you that this is a right-wing thing, these tariffs, and they're going to destroy the economy when this is the same thing that they've been talking about and addressing in different ways. Now, notably, Trump is doing this in a lot more aggressive way, but in the past, what these other people have done, talking about tariffs and stuff might have had some impact, but it hasn't really changed the status quo, right? And so what we're trying to do with Trump's trying to do with these bold initiatives is change the status quo that has been in place for years and years. And again, these are reciprocal tariffs. We're just wanting a fair playground. We're wanting to reduce our trade deficit, right? If other countries drop their tariffs, we drop our tariffs. So a tweet here from DC Drano says, almost every American country charges a high tariff on American goods. So Trump is issuing equal treatment right back, except at half the cost. If other countries drop their tariffs, we'll drop ours. And if they don't drop them, companies will be built in America. Win-win. But not according to what you say, what people are saying, right? This is the biggest disaster, the biggest loss, basically in American history, is what people are trying to get you to believe, the establishment, the status quo people. Then another clip here. Let's look at this. These are members of Trump's team talking about how tariffs can be a game changer. Let's play that.
The announcement today is the most significant action on global trade policy that has taken place in our lifetimes. It's not even a close call. I mean, this is probably the biggest event that's happened on global trade since the very ill-fated decision that we are now reversing of knocking down all of America's trade tariffs and revenue policies that led to the offshoring and outsourcing of all of our industries. So this is the great reversal of that great betrayal, is how I would look at it. So in the 20th century, successive American presidents knocked down all of the policies that we had to protect American industry, and they did insane things like letting China into the World Trade Organization, as an example. And we watched all of our factories go overseas. This is the complete reversal of that. This is the great onshoring, the great reshoring of American jobs and wealth. So if you look at America today, we're totally dependent on foreign countries for the supplies that make this country run, for all of the essential goods, materials, manufactured products that make it possible for us to live our lives. Our cars, our electronics, all the materials that go into our homes, our buildings, our medical supplies, our entire supply chains are completely embedded in foreign countries. So if there's a national emergency of any kind, and a country shuts off an import, or a foreign power embargoes a sea lane, we are then left defenseless, helpless.
So the great betrayal, and this started really in the late 80s, where we started selling out to China. Not only the government, but businesses, right? Looking for cheap labor, dollar signs in their eyes, corporate greed. They're also part of this too. And so this is the reversal of that great betrayal. And again, people want you to believe that the status quo is fine and everything's fine. Like, everything's not fine. When we had 4 years with Biden and all the inflation, like some of the biggest inflation across 4 years. I mean, more debasing of the dollar, you're paying 50 to 100% or more for food. But no, people are trying to tell you that everything's fine and that we don't need drastic change. We do need drastic change. We're on a sinking ship here, and that's all we're trying to do here is create an environment where the trade is more balanced. So we're not basically funding other countries, and we're keeping that money in the U.S. It seems very reasonable, but people out there on both sides, liberals and conservatives all over, want you to think that this is the most unreasonable and craziest thing ever.
This is what I don't understand. The reciprocal tariffs going into place April 2nd, which means if you're tariffing our cars 100%, we're going to tariff your cars 100%. Well, you're already selling the cars in the United States, or whatever the product may be, French wine or whatever. What France has to do is they have to take all their tariffs off on us. So there's no change in prices. The only change is we get now an opportunity to export our manufactured goods into France and Europe and other countries because this is not a punitive tariff. This is meant to eliminate the tariffs on our goods going in. This is why these brain-dead liberals and Republicans don't even understand what this means. It is so infuriating for a protectionist like me that has studied this my whole life, that understands it.
All they have to do is drop their tariffs and we drop our tariffs. It's that simple. And this is the most insane, unreasonable scheme people would have you believe. Now, I get that this could cause some short-term issues, right? Supply chain and all that sort of thing. And we're dealing with the brunt of that right now with the stock market and the crypto markets and other things like that. It's not going to be easy, but it's in my opinion, is necessary. People want a quick fix in our society. They want quick results, but real change takes pain in order to get the gain. And that's the same in investing. You have to take the pain in order to get the gains. You have to hold your money through all this crap because you believe in something, because you believe in Bitcoin. And if you've held Bitcoin for multiple years, everyone that holds Bitcoin for multiple years is in profit. No pain, no gain. No big changes, no gain. Okay. But on the other side, there's also a lot of non-pro-Trumpers that have talked about how they support these tariffs. I won't play this clip, but there's a clip of this guy kind of breaking it down and saying how this is going to be good for his business, right? But basically he's saying that although his product is a little bit more than you're paying for the product from China, all that money goes back into the US economy. It also creates more demand for these places to produce more products in America, which increases wages for people because now you have more demand for labor, right? So basically this guy says, yes, this is more expensive for the consumer in the short term, but in the long term, it benefits the economy overall. We need to understand here too that tariffs are just one piece of the puzzle. Trump and his team, it's important to say this too, because it's not just Trump going out doing crazy stuff. He's got a whole team of economists, and they have their economic philosophy, right? And this is a chess match. It's not a checkers match. And the ultimate goal of these tariffs is not just all about tariffs, but there's a bigger plan that Trump has in mind, which I'll get to here. But if we look at this tweet from Clandestine about Liberation Day, he says that today will be known as the day that ended our economic slavery. If Trump's plan is successful and tariffs replace income tax, the quality of life of American people will be significantly better, and we will no longer be indentured servants to a corrupt machine. No longer will our labor be taxed to fund war and destruction around the globe. No longer will our labor be taxed just for the corrupt ruling class to line their pockets off of our suffering. We are currently slaves to the IRS, and Trump's tariff economic plan is trying to end that. That's why if Trump's plan works, today will be known as Liberation Day. So one of the end games here is to end income taxes and replace it with these tariffs. Now, Trump has already mentioned that we're going to have the biggest tax cuts ever this year, and kind of stopping short. Well, as he's mentioned it before, that he wants to get rid of all income tax, right? He's not really going that far lately, but if this thing works out the way it's intended to, then that's what the end result could be. Now, you have all sorts of conservatives too coming out against these tariffs. Ben Shapiro for one, Fred Krueger, who I used to like, but he's recently come out and saying these tariffs are a horrible idea. They're going to kill the economy. He used to be a Bitcoin only guy, but then he got into meme coins, which is fine, and he put out like one of his own meme coins, but then he put out 3 or 4 more meme coins. And when you do that, when you put out several meme coins in a row, you're basically a grifter. You're grifting people. Like, let's be honest about it. If you put out one meme coin, that's fine. But if you put out 3 or 4 in succession, you're just trying to make money. And so he's kind of, in my opinion, he's kind of fallen off the table of being credible in what he says, and him just bashing Trump and these tariffs. So Ben Shapiro, him, plenty of other people. Rand Paul calling this taxation without representation, which is another thing that gets to me, because this whole taxation without representation, it's basically saying, like, as long as you're represented, we can tax you whatever the hell we want. We can tax you 20, 30% income tax. We're all paying multiple taxes on the same dollar that we're receiving. We're paying income tax, we're paying sales tax, we're paying property tax, but that's okay as long as we're represented, right? Another thing is, like, we actually are represented, and so these tariffs are actually, we're represented under the law. So how is that any different with these tariffs? So these people are trying to separate it out and call this the biggest unconstitutional thing too. Again, these are people that want the status quo to remain the same. You know, these are the people that are coming out here who want you to think like everything's fine. Like there's nothing to see here, go about your daily business. There's nothing going on here. The economy's not collapsing. Everything's good. Trump's trying to set up this perfect economic utopia that we had under Biden. It's insane. Another thing here that people aren't telling you is that inflation is actually coming down. So if you look here at the true inflation chart, we can see that it's just over 1%, and you can see how far it's come down lately. But according to the Fed and other sources, that's not what they want you to believe right now. Of course, they're always behind the curve on all this stuff. And eventually this is going to become apparent that inflation is coming down. So another chess piece here is that Trump wants the rates reduced, but the Fed isn't really being accommodating to that right now. And if you've watched my video, it's probably my best video, but hardly anyone watched it for some reason. But it's about how asking the question of will Trump end the Fed? And I think Trump, if he could, would actually get rid of the Fed if he could. But I think there's just so much power and influence with the Fed that he can't really do that. So he has to do it in other ways. And this is a tool that he can use. Increasing tariffs is a tool that he can use that can, in the short term, sort of destabilize the economy and get the Fed to lower their rates in order to, because they want to avoid, negative consequences, recession, unemployment, and things like that. So they'll eventually turn that money printer on and lower the interest rates as well. So that's another piece of this that Trump is trying to do that isn't necessarily apparent. And of course, when the money printer turns on, then the Bitcoin price and the crypto prices go up. Here's a good tweet also from George here. He says the Trump team is conducting a controlled demolition of a fake economy to build a new one. The more the 10-year Treasury yield drops, the more interest rate cuts we will get from the Fed, which should be ended, by the way, which I agree with, of course, if you watch that video about ending the Fed. The boom we'll witness when the rates come down will be generational. So that's really what Trump is trying to do here, is get the lowered rates, which should already come by now, because we can see with the true inflation numbers, right? We're in a position now where we're going to have more rate cuts, and the Fed is eventually going to have to do this, even though they don't really want to. Another tweet from George: my friends, what you're seeing over the news right now is an unprecedented effort by the globalists to convince normies that tariffs are bad. And the FUD out there about tariffs is just incredible. Like if you look at Twitter or anywhere, like this is like COVID level stuff that they're trying to convince you about these tariffs. And then here's another clip from White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who basically sums up this whole situation with the tariffs really well.
Can someone explain to me? We protect and defend South Korea. And in exchange, they steal our automobile industry, they steal our electronics industry. We protect and defend Japan, and in exchange, they close their market to our cars. We protect and defend Canada, and they run up a massive trade deficit with us. We protect and defend all of Europe at a cost of trillions of dollars over time, and what do? They run an over $300 billion trade deficit with the United States. Why should America protect the world, send foreign aid to the world, defend the world, provide for the world, and in exchange, get ripped off by every other country in the world? And what do we have to show for it? The deindustrialization of the heartland, the destruction of the American dream, the eradication of our industrial and manufacturing base that we need for our national security, and the crushing of the American dream. It has to stop, not to mention $36 trillion in debt.
So that's what I have to say about these tariffs and about what's really going on and what really the end game is here. And now looking at Bitcoin, which is another end game of the Trump administration too. Ultimately, although again short-term pain, he wants crypto, Bitcoin to go up and the stock market to go up. That's one of his goals as well. And so he thinks this is the best way to accomplish that. And as we can see with Powell, he's already starting to say that the U.S. is ending quantitative tightening and heading into quantitative easing. And article here from 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀, which is he's a big crypto guy who's been around for a while, owns an investment firm and a couple of different businesses, but he said Powell laid out the path toward a resumption of quantitative easing focused on the U.S. Treasury bond market. While everyone is hemming and hawing about whether the effects of tariffs are good or bad, what the crypto market should be rejoicing is that quantitative easing will resume, and he believes this will happen by this summer. So, as I said before, this is basically just getting pushed back, and we may have to wait until the summer before this quantitative easing comes. But it's basically the only way out is more money printing, because we've dug ourselves into such a big hole that we're going to have to eventually turn the money printers on, right? So going on, 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀 says former U.S. President Biden continued Trump's policies of curtailing Chinese access to semiconductors and other segments of the U.S. market. During her failed presidential campaign, Biden's Vice President Kamala Harris also employed tough on China rhetoric, which I've talked about, all this rhetoric from the left, and people want you to believe this is a MAGA issue that they dreamt up. While Republicans and Democrats might disagree on the pace and depth of the change, both parties advocated for it nonetheless. And then he talks about this chart where we've had the trade balance. This chart basically represents the trade balance, and you can see that up until the 80s, this was fairly balanced, and then it got really out of hand, and it became more balanced again at the end of the 80s. But then it after that, this really when it got really out of control, as you can see by the departure there. So things have just gotten worse and worse with the trade deficit, and that's what we're, as a country, Trump is working to restore here with these tariffs. Now, right now we have a strong dollar, which puts us in a stronger negotiating position, and Trump knows this. And I've talked about this on this channel before, that he's basically using this strong dollar as a negotiating tool to enact these tariffs, which, although like we're going to benefit for the increased tariffs, but it's also going to bring the dollar down, which is also going to be good for the stock market and Bitcoin. So this is kind of a good summary here. It says Trump's policies create a feedback loop. Tariffs and spending inflate deficits and prices, necessitating cheap financing and liquidity. The Fed, boxed in by fiscal needs and political reality, lowers rates to cushion growth and prints money to absorb debt, even if it sacrifices inflation targets. This aligns with what 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀𝗁 was talking about, the quantitative easing resuming in the summer of 2025, driven by Trump and Bessent, their policies, and that Powell will basically reluctantly have to pivot, flooding markets with dollars and boosting assets like Bitcoin. So the Fed's hand isn't just forced, it's tied. So if we go back to what 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀 is saying, and more along the lines of the main topic of this video, which you all care about, right, is where is the price of Bitcoin going? Are we all screwed? If we look at this thing and this thing plays out right, we can expect that, as 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀 here is saying, Bitcoin trades solely based on the market expectation for the future supply of fiat. If my analysis of the Fed's major pivot from QT to QA for treasuries is correct, then Bitcoin hit a local low of 76.5 last month, and now we begin the ascent to 250,000 by the end of the year. Of course, this is not an exact science, but using the gold example, if I had to place a bet on whether I thought Bitcoin would hit 76.5 or 110,000 first, I would bet on the latter. Even if the U.S. stocks continue following in reaction to tariffs, a collapse in earnings expectations, or the foreigner demand waning, I am confident that the odds favor Bitcoin continuing to climb higher. Cognizant of the 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲𝗀𝗀 Maelstrom, which is his company, is deploying capital cautiously. We use no leverage, and we buy in small clips relative to the size of our total portfolio. When the market goes up, I want to wish my size was bigger, but I'm thankful it's not when the market trades below. So he says we have been buying Bitcoin and shitcoins at levels below 90 and 60,000 and 76.5. So this is the zone. According to this and this other analysis, this zone from 76 to 90 is a great opportunity to buy Bitcoin. And I think if we look in 5 years, you're probably going to be bragging to people about how you bought Bitcoin under $100,000. To me, I think that's the reality. So there is a path to 200K Bitcoin still. This is still on our sites. Nothing has changed. And all of this, tariffs and everything, have the end goal of getting the federal lowering the interest rates, the money printer turning on, and these risk-on assets going up, along with making the U.S. a stronger economy. The U.S. is the biggest consumer of the world, and that includes the biggest consumer of Bitcoin. And so if we can have a stronger economy with more jobs and things like that, then we have, as a nation, more money to invest. And we're going to look at things like, gold, Bitcoin, the stock market, and things like that. So that's my big breakdown. Again, this is chess, not checkers. These are moves intended for a desired consequence, and that is putting America in a stronger position than we are now and increasing everything across the board, including risk assets and Bitcoin. So make sure to like if you found this video helpful. You can also follow me on Twitter at 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 to stay even more up to date with news and other alpha that I'm providing. Also, links in the description for deals. If you haven't signed up for Kraken, that's one of my favorite exchanges. You can sign up there and get $20. When you trade $100 worth of crypto, you'll get a $20 bonus. And there's other links in the description as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.